It is a first down. Pirates.
You can paint this one purple. What an incredible win by the ECU Pirates.
Welcome into Blackbeard's Alley, a Pirate Football podcast. We appreciate everyone tuning in. We're talking East Carolina football, the American, as well as another variety of topics throughout the evening. We'll be with you for the next 45 minutes or so. And tonight we're joined, as you see there on the screen, by longtime ESPN color analyst and UMASS Hall of Fame running back, Rene Ingoglia. Rene, we appreciate your time. How's your summer been?
Excellent, Bubba. Always great to join you. It's been good. I'm one of those guys that I love summer, but man, we start getting towards July, I start itching for college football. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, no doubt. We're less than 2 weeks to week 0, and of course a little less than 3 weeks until East Carolina travels down to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama. Very easy opener, right? But
Yeah.
Here, I guess a little over 3 weeks ago now, there the final week or so of July, you were down there in Tampa, St. Pete for the annual media days, a new venue for that event. Last year it was here in Charlotte, so of course I missed it not being here this year. But being there on the scene, what were some of your major takeaways of American Conference Media Day?
I mean, first of all, I like what Commissioner Tim Pernetti does, right? I think as a group of 6 conference that, you're always fighting, right, to be the top of the group of 6 and be included with the P4s. I like how he moves the media days around, or American kickoff, as they call it. As you know, SEC was just down the street, maybe 30 minutes down the road in Tampa. So it was nice. So by doing that, you get a lot of holdover media, which is nice. So it's smart. Last year, Charlotte kind of piggybacked off the ACC. This year, SEC. So I think it went well. Venue was great. The biggest takeaway is the poor American. It's like every year, coaches get purged, players get purged. I don't know if you saw this stat, but 78% of last year's American first and second team conference, if that makes sense, got taken up to the Power 4. I mean, that's a crazy stat when you think about it. But that's college football today, Bubba. So you, as a program, as a conference, you almost have to embrace that. And know that it's a good thing. Like, hey, we're putting out really good players. And at the end of the day, if a big power program is going to come with a lot of money and take our players, I mean, that's kind of a badge of honor for us. And so you got 78% of your top players, first and second, all conference get taken. Then you get 4 of your coaches taken to the Power 4, right? And 3 to the SEC. So, but the American, and they've always done this. Even years ago, they've always had this uncanny ability just to keep plugging forward, thinking outside the box, and just keep building. And they've always done it with players, with coaches, with programs. So I'm excited for this year. I would say, I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to go ahead since I'm on a little rant here. I don't remember the American, honestly, being this wide open ever since I've covered them. You said long time ESPN analyst. It's funny. This is going to be my 17th year. It doesn't feel like it. And I've covered the American from the beginning. It really, really feels wide open this year. So I'm excited for this season.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was an excellent point regarding nearly 80% of the top 44, if you will.
Yep.
Moving on, that was something that Blake Harrell mentioned in his media day comments, or American kickoff comments, if you will. John Sumrall to Florida. Obviously, Alex Golesh moving on to Auburn, Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas, and then, of course, Eric Morris to Oklahoma State. So very intrigued to see how they do it, their new destinations. We'll start off with East Carolina. Of course, that's our focus here on Blackbeard's Alley. And Blake Harrell entering his second full season, but he's been, like he mentioned in his media day comments down in Tampa, that he's been a part of this Pirate program since 2020. And with that being the case, outside of Ryan Newberry, Jeff Monken, and then also Jeff Traylor. He's one of the longest tenured coaches in this league. So what are your thoughts on what Blake Harrell's been able to accomplish these last 2 seasons, or a season and a half, if you will, 14-5?
First of all, he's got a great personality, and I know you know this, Bob, but anyone that knows him knows what kind of person he is. He's a player's coach in that, he's not overbearing. He doesn't have an ego, and I think players see that, and they play really hard for him. The other thing I think he does extremely well is he delegates, right? Because when you are an assistant coach and a coordinator, you know what you like out of your head coach. Then when you get that opportunity to become a head coach like Blake did, he delegates really well. And of course, he brings in two new coordinators, Jordan Davis and Jordan Hankins. And I've said this before, and I said it during the American kickoff. I love that they were both in the conference last year, right? So you're bringing coordinators that are already familiar with the programs. They're familiar with what goes on. I mean, you got Army and Navy that we know what their offenses are like, always hard to get ready for. Rice, similar, right, with a triple option attack. So bringing coordinators in on defense, offense that have seen the league, I think bodes well for ECU. But again, it's just not ECU. All these schools are in this same kind of bubble where, it's when you do well and you win games and you go to bowl games, you got good players on your roster. Unfortunately, they move on, right, to Power 4, and ECU lost a lot. I think they did a nice job, going in the portal themselves. But I say that in that, you bring a team together in the spring and you bring them together in fall camp, and at the end of the day, you've got a quarterback battle going on. You just never really know, right, what you're going to get and if they gel. And that's where the head coach really has to earn his money, more so than the X's and O's. It's really blending a team together with a bunch of new faces. But the good news is literally every team in the nation is kind of in that same boat.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the guys that move on. Obviously, Caton Hauser to Illinois. You have a couple of extremely athletic tight ends, and with J.C. Connor and Desirio Riles moving on to Vandy and Florida State and on down the line, you look at their landing spots. I mean, it speaks to the way this staff had recruited, a lot of which on the staff is still intact. And so as you look at Jordan Davis coming over, there are going to be some differences between what he does and what JDB that moved on or back to Ole Miss, joining Pete Golding's staff there. One of the things that I think we're going to see a lot more of are shallow crossing concepts and also screens, which was something that we were very familiar with under Ruffin McNeil and Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, well, we know what Jordan Davis and Eric Morris did in North Texas, right? And I mean, what a prolific year Drew Messamaker had. And you mentioned him earlier. It's going to be fascinating to watch him, right, at Oklahoma State, what he does. But the one thing I think Jordan Davis will do, and I think Blake Harrell wants, you're still going to see that up-tempo, fast offense, right? That boded really well for the offense last year. I think the stat I saw, and I think I repeated to Blake, when the ECU offense had over, I think, 408 yards of total offense. I think they were 6-0 last year. I think that was the stat. So you put yards up, you go fast. And listen, Blake's a defensive coach, right? And defensive coaches can go to their coordinators and they can say, okay, this is what drives defenses crazy. This is the hardest thing to defend. And really, I think it is that fast, up-tempo offense. Now, you got to be careful, right? Because we know you can go too fast and really hurt yourself and hurt your defense. So it's good to go fast, but you got to be productive too. So it's going to be interesting, but I think if you're an ECU fan, I think you're still going to see a high-tempo, up-tempo offense trying to put a lot of points on the board. So it should be fun.
Yeah, to your point, there was an article on ESPN here in the last day or two that was referencing just that, how over the last 8 to 10 years, it had gone from a little over 13 possessions per game for each team down to less than 12 possessions with the new clock rules and the clock not stopping on first downs, which is a huge difference.
And that's why you have to take advantage of possessions when you get them. It's good, great to go fast. I think it's good, but if you're not executing, when you're going fast, then that's a lost possession. Your defense is back on the field. So you have to execute. Yeah. And you have to take advantage of those possessions. And there was another stat I saw where it said, although North Texas led the country in offense last year, it was one of the lower offenses in a long time. And I think, to your point, Bubba, that is because the drop in possessions, because that clock runs faster now. Now, I think we all agree, though, the new timing rules the last few years, it is better for college football. The games were just going way too long, and I think the quicker pace, not stopping it after first downs, it's a better flow to the game for sure.
And then for a few teams, or several teams, you're obviously hoping to navigate your way to a national title, in which case you're going to be playing 16 or 17 games.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it. And so it's funny, I just had this conversation with someone the other day because, you get to the 12-team playoff, and the thing is, like, first and foremost, you got to get there, right? But once you get there, it's like, okay, who's the healthiest, right? What team is kind of peaking at the right time? Like Miami is a great example, right? I mean, I think they started strong. I think they had a little bit of a lull, right, halfway through, but they make it into the playoff. They almost didn't, right? I mean, they almost took Notre Dame, and they came to their senses, took Miami, and then boom, Miami got it going at the right time, and pretty much almost won a national championship, right? They got there and had a chance. So yeah, what teams are healthy and what teams are peaking at the end. And so, yeah, it's for sure you want to be ready to go when you make it to the playoffs.
Before we move on from the Pirates, I did want to go to this question from Kenny Curlings. He read my mind. He knew where I was headed next, and that is to the quarterback battle that's currently taking place between Emory Williams, the Miami transfer, who started a few games for the Hurricanes over his time there in Coral Gables and had the chance to garner a win against the Clemson Tigers, and then Mitch Griffiths, who started 10 games throughout his career, 1 at Texas Tech and 9 at Wake Forest, where he was the starter for the majority of the season for the Demon Deacons that one year in that slow mesh offense. And then last year, of course, operating a system at Texas Tech, starting that game, I think it was against Oklahoma State, and faring very well in something similar to what he's being asked to do now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Texas Tech a little different than the slow mesh that Griffiths ran at Wake Forest. I haven't seen him in person. I've seen Emory Williams in person. Both of them are extremely talented. But the question is on the money, right? Because which quarterback can grasp the system that Jordan Davis wants to run the best, and who can command it and take control of the offense? And that's the thing. When you have a battle going into camp, every coach will tell you they don't want to have to pick the starting quarterback. They want that starting quarterback to pick himself. And you can see that, right, with who's operating the offense the best, who's the most efficient, and who the team gravitates to. And they got 2 good ones right there. So I think whoever ends up winning that job, they're in good hands. Now, you mentioned it kind of tongue-in-cheek when we just first started the show. Unfortunately for them, you don't get like an FCS to kind of get your feet wet with this offense. You got to go to Tuscaloosa. So it's kind of tough. And we've talked about it off the air, and ECU fans know. I mean, you look at these first 3. You're at Alabama. You get App State at home, but we know, the problems ECU's had with App State. But this is a year, I think, if you're ECU, you got to get App State at home, right? You got to get that one. And then Old Dominion's always been a tough game out of the Sun Belt, and you're at Old Dominion. So the first 3 weeks for ECU are gonna tell a lot, I think, for this program.
Yeah, well said. Certainly, Old Dominion won 10 games last year, and yes, they lost a lot from that team, but Ricky Ronnie's done a tremendous job and played Indiana better than most.
Yeah.
But moving on, and I'm going to throw up the American standings here. This year, I don't think there was an official preseason poll, but it was one that was floating out there. So you had Navy with 11 first-place votes, and easily your champion there, but you did have 5 teams receive first place votes in addition to the midshipmen. Memphis with new coach Charles Huff, on Jeff Traylor and UTSA, Brian Hartline down at USF, and then of course Blake Carroll and the Pirates. So as you look at those standings, let's just start there at the top. The way people think Navy will finish, and Brian Newberry in his 4th season now, after 5-7 in year 1, has gone 21-5 since, with those bowl wins over Oklahoma and Cincinnati.
Yeah, they've been tremendous. And the thing with Navy, and I'll throw Army in there too, with the transfer portal, yeah, they lose a player here or there, but by and large, they don't. Obviously, they don't bring players in either, but they always are building, right? Like Braxton Woodson's been there, right? He was underneath Horvath. He saw Blake and what he did, and he knows the offense and he knows the system, and he's a dynamic athlete. So they're one of those programs, offensive coordinator Drew Cronick, that they just reload and go. So I understand why they were the pick to win it all in the American. Again, though, I'll go back to what I said early. I really think there's 6-7 I think you showed that whole left side there, 7 teams. I think Tulane was, look at Tulane 7 there. So I really think there's about 7 or 8 teams, half the conference, I think has a chance. I got asked, we kind of make our picks. I went with UTSA just because obviously an experienced quarterback and they just haven't really turned that page with Jeff Traylor. And I just thought, well, maybe this is a year. You talked about Charles Huff at Memphis. Really, really impressed speaking with him. And he's won everywhere he went. I did Southern Miss in the New Orleans Bowl last year, which, of course, was his team. He had already left, so he didn't coach in that bowl. But he took a lot of good players from that Southern Miss team to Memphis. So he's did really good in the portal. So, they're one to look out for. USF, Brian Hartline, super intriguing to me. There's another team that did really well in the portal. Of course, ECU, we know what they have going. Army, again, it's a reload team, so you can never count them out. Tulane's got good pieces, but again, because it is so wide open, they get knocked down to 7. So, those 7 are fascinating. North Texas is another one. With so much that they lost, but Neil Brown brought a ton in the portal. He got some guys from West Virginia that he originally recruited. So it's going to be a fun, wide open year, in my opinion, in the American.
Let's elaborate a little bit more on the UTSA Roadrunners. You mentioned how maybe they can get it into the mix. They were 7-6, 4-4 in each of the last 2 seasons. Tremendous in the Alamo Dome, but have really struggled on the road. And it's kind of tough to put your finger on. I know Blake Carroll, of course, the Pirates got dominated last year in the Alamo Dome. But he said he and Will Hall and a number of the American coaches were kidding Coach Traylor about the noise there at the Alamo Dome. He said, you have that noise of 40,000 people when there's not anywhere near that number of people in the stands. But just kind of in a good-natured way. What are your thoughts on that situation with UTSA? And there's no doubt there have been at times, where they had a legit 35 or 40,000 there, but at other times, not necessarily.
It is a tremendous venue. I've called a few games there. So I did the Rice game there last year, and I did Rice a couple times, and they weren't a bad team last year. I mean, they've done a nice job. I have never called a conference game that is, where one team just physically beat up the other team. I mean, UTSA knocked 3 quarterbacks out of the game for Rice. I mean, with legitimate, just hard hits, nothing cheap. So you're right. And we asked Jeff Traylor about this. They were a completely different team at home. Yeah, it gets loud in that dome because it is a cool venue, because it's a great sized dome. It's not overwhelmingly big, so it does get loud in there. But they just play different there, and it was amazing to me. And he's trying to put his finger on it too. But the fact that you have your quarterback back with as much experience as McCown has, and you bring some pieces in defensively, I just, they've won a conference championship when they were in Conference USA. They haven't been able to turn that corner, if you will, in the American. So I'm just thinking in a wide open year, keep an eye on them. And Jeff Traylor's a good coach. He is. And I think a lot, and your caller kind of alluded to it as well. To me, first and foremost, you better have a quarterback in play, and you better be playing high level football if you want to compete for a conference championship or make a college football playoff. And so I think they're in a good position that right there with quarterback play, and then they have some other pieces there as well. So they're one that I'm interested to watch this season.
Obviously, one of those coaches that I mentioned earlier, John Sumrall, moving on to the Florida Gators. Will Hall getting that job. Kind of mixed results during his time at Southern Miss. He had some success, but not exactly nowhere near the situation that he took over here in New Orleans, to say the least. So very, very intrigued to see how that goes. What were your thoughts on that hire?
Yeah, I think Will Hall, obviously a very qualified person to get that job. He's been a head coach before. I don't think it wasn't a wow hire, I think, for Tulane fans. And I think for the media as well. That's why you see Tulane, who's been, predominantly at the top of the conference the last 4 or 5 years, really, dropped all the way to 7th in that preseason poll. So that's another one. It's interesting to watch and see how he does, because if they get off to a slow start, right, there's going to be a lot of people saying, what is going on? I was a huge John Sumrall fan. It's funny, living here in Orlando, I'm surrounded by Gator fans. And so all last season, everyone, the talk was Lane Kiffin, right? Everyone thought, Miami and Florida went after Lane Kiffin. I don't think there's no doubt. There's no question about that. But I told someone before those hirings were made, I said, listen, if Kiffin doesn't come to Florida, I said, John Sumrall is the next hire. And I said, you're probably better off with Sumrall. I think that's how good of a coach I think he is. The problem with the Florida fans were they were just kind of putting him in the same box of their former coach because of Sunbelt and Group of Six and so on. I said no, he's not like that. He's a very good coach, and they're super impressed with Sumrall. So it'll be interesting to see what Florida does. But it's hard, if you're Tulane, it's hard. You have Willie Fritz does what he does. He leaves and goes to Houston. Then you hit a home run. You bring in John Sumrall, and you lose him. And it's like, boy, and you see all these coaches going. And I think they felt, Will Hall was on the staff. He had been a head coach, and that was the best hire possible. And it may be. So we'll see. He's going to get his shot for sure. It's interesting. I was just perusing some of the schedules. They play Southern Miss is like a big game, the Southern Miss Tulane game. So they play this year. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. And then of course, Billy, you're talking about Florida. Billy Napier gets let go and then lands at JMU. So that, even though we're not talking Sunbelt, that's another one with all the success JMU had. How's Billy Napier going to do there? Because if they get off to a slow start, those fans are going to be a little disgruntled as well. So yeah, listen, Bubba, there is a ton of storylines all around college football this year. It is going to be a fun year, whether you're a fan of your particular team or just a fan of college football in general. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, to your point about John Sumrall, if I'm scrolling social media and I see a clip with him, more often than not, I'm gonna watch it because he's very entertaining, very passionate.
Yeah, for sure. And he brought both coordinators with him to Florida, and they're just position coaches. So he put together a really, really good staff up there. So, and the good thing about Sumrall sitting at Florida is, I think this first year, there's no real high expectations, right? I think he's playing with house money this year, so just go out and play and see what happens. So it's going to be a fun year.
Going back to these standings, let's look at the back half here. Starting off with the FAU Owls. Last year, it was a real struggle defensively. We saw what you would expect to see from a Zach Kitley offense coming over from Texas Tech, and everything that Caden Veltkamp, the former Western Kentucky quarterback, can do. This year, he's going to need to take better care of the football and hopefully get a lot more stops on the defensive side.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, offensively, move the ball, too many turnovers. But yeah, the defense is the question there. They got a tough start. They go to the aforementioned Florida. We were just talking about that's where they open up in the swamp, and then they come home and get Navy. So you want to talk about putting your defense to the test right away. You got to go play an SEC team at their venue, and then you come home and you get Navy, which is arguably the best offense in the conference, right? I mean, so yeah, good luck for those first two. Tulsa's another one. Trey Lamb, listen, they market improvements last year. They open up, interesting enough, against Oklahoma State at home. That's a quasi-American game, right? With all the North Texas players that now are at Oklahoma State with Eric Morris. So that's going to be a fascinating one. North Texas, we talked about them a little bit. Casey Keeler had Temple right on the doorstep of getting to a bowl game, lost a couple close games last year. So they're another one to watch. Rice has some new quarterbacks in there and running that system. So we'll see if they can take the next step. And then UAB and Charlotte, there's really nowhere to go but up, especially for Charlotte. Charlotte, Tim Elbin did not make any changes on his coaching staff. So he has some continuity there with the players. There's no doubt I think they're going to be better. And UAB, we talked about FAU defensively. UAB, very similar, right? They bring in Todd Grantham, very, very experienced former head coach. It's the defensive coordinator, because offensively they got some stuff going, especially in the end of the year when they upset Memphis. But they need a lot of help defensively. But I do think UAB and Charlotte will both be improved.
Let's go to this comment from Kenny Curlings. I agree, Kenny. He said he likes Trey Lamb, of course, having already been a head coach at Gardner-Webb, and then a solid first year at East Tennessee State, where they were, I think, 1 point away from knocking off North Dakota State in that season opener. So he's someone that I've kind of had an eye on now. This is his third head coaching job at just 36 years old, and very intrigued to see how his career progresses. I know last year at the American Kickoff in Charlotte, I was very entertained by what he had to say, and he actually called his shot as far as Oklahoma State and the Golden Hurricane. And I understand Oklahoma State was as bad as they've been in quite some time, but still, it's not like Tulsa is where that program is potentially headed either, and they went to Stillwater and won.
Yeah, no doubt. The thing that impressed me about Trey Lamb in Tulsa, first of all, they have a great secondary. They may, top to bottom, may have the best defensive secondary in the American. They bring back Elijah Green, 5 interceptions last year. The thing that impressed me when I looked at their roster, top to bottom, was roster retention, right? We talk about the portal because, you're losing players. They did a nice job retaining players, which tells me their school, their donors, people stepped up in the NIL area and to be able to keep players. So they had a nice roster retention. Baylor Hayes was their quarterback, had nice growth last year. We talked about quarterback play. So they're a team that I definitely think is going to take a step up. And yeah, boy, you get a chance to beat Oklahoma State, a Big 12 team from right down the road 2 years in a row. You get them at home. That place should be popping. Should be sold out. That's a nice little venue. It's about a 30,000 seat stadium. Now, granted, probably going to be some Oklahoma State fans there getting tickets on the secondary market, but that should be a fun one, week one. But yeah, I'm a big Trey Lamb fan as well. And he's a great golfer too. I don't know if you know that. He's like a +5 golfer. He's like quasi-professional. So it's funny. I talked to him about it. He probably won't get mad at me saying this. I'm like, Coach, you haven't really seen any videos if you golf. And he goes, yeah, I don't want to put anything on, because he's right. Because if you put videos on golfing and you lose a couple games, the fan base goes nuts. Oh, he just wants to golf. And, so it's a no-win situation. I agree. That happened with who was at Albany?
Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, that the Hugh Freeze thing. And we joked about that. But he's a legit, really good golfer. It's Trey Lamb. So.
But Kenny Curlings went on to say, talking about Trey Lamb, that back in 2023, when East Carolina made a change there on the OC side of things, that before hiring John David Baker, that Trey Lamb had inquired about the position, and it was former East Carolina quarterback Holton Ahlers that broke that news. Give credit to the Holton Ahlers show But yeah, that was
It's so,
interesting. You
I
know,
will
he
say
was
this.
going to leave his head coaching position at Gardner Webb to
Yeah.
come to ECU as OC.
I will say this: it's so hard to Monday morning quarterback that. I mean, you look at it, hindsight's 2020. Like, I went to UMass. I love my school. They were not very good last year. They are going to be markedly better this year. There's no doubt about it. But we had back in the day, there was an All-American quarterback that played there by the name of Liam Cohen. Okay, there's Liam, coach in the NFL. He was offensive coordinator at Kentucky, but he had no head coaching experience. There is no doubt back 4 or 5 years ago, UMass could have hired Liam Cohen as the head coach, right? And now he's the head coach of Jacksonville Jaguars. So people say that all the time. Oh, they missed on Liam. It's just that'll drive you nuts, right? Not because you just don't know. So it's hard. It's hard, and it'll drive you nuts. But yeah, I say that all in that Trey Lamb would have been a tremendous coach, but offensive coordinator. But sometimes the path doesn't work out. And he probably is sitting back saying it worked out the way he would have rather it to work out now that he's the head coach at Tulsa.
And then Kenny Curling's also said, and with Coach Morris moving on from North Texas, and a lot of those mean green players are, of course, now Cowboys.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. That's why I said that Oklahoma State Tulsa game, that's a quasi-American game because Oklahoma State has so many players from North Texas, along with the coaching staff, or most of the coaching staff. So we'll see. But it's just, again, it's another badge of honor for the American Conference. There's no doubt about it. The coach goes there. A lot of the players, I mean, all the skill went there. But you know me, Bubba. You need the skill players. You need the running backs. Hawkins was a great running back. I'm curious to see what he does. Caleb Hawkins. Receivers were great there, but you better win up front. Your offensive and defensive lines better play football because I don't care how good your skill is. If you cannot win up front, you're in trouble.
Before we move on from the American, I did want to ask you about John Gruden. Of course, Coach Gruden was there on Thursday. Give us a glimpse behind the curtain. I know Blake Harrell was asked in the Greenville media just as far as Coach Gruden and kind of what he appears on social media. And he said he was very engaging and he was impressed with the knowledge he had of East Carolina as well as the other American teams.
Yeah, he's a football junkie. Like what you see on his videos, that's him in person. He's a wealth of knowledge, right? I wish, X's and O's wise, I wish I knew a fraction of what he knows. And he's just a fun guy. He loves football. So yes, what you see on social media is really him. He's not a made up persona. That is him. He loves football in general. I was gonna say college football. He loves NFL. He loves everything. So, and it was fun. He had a table set up kind of behind us to the side where he brought players in, and it was fun. I forgot who it was. It might have been, it was Caden Velkamp. When he had FAU over there, I mean, Velkamp was in his pads. They were taking pictures in another room, so there must have been a time constraint. So he didn't take his pads off. So he had Velkamp on the whiteboard, drawing up plays like he does, like when he brings quarterbacks in before they go to the draft. So that is all John Gruden fascinating. So yeah. Listen, it was great having him around. I think it's good. It was great for the conference, and it was a fun day and a half at the American kickoff.
Yeah, East Carolina veteran wide receiver Brock Spalding joked that the route that he drew up, he's like, Coach, don't worry about it. He said, this is our route from last year.
Man, nice.
But moving on from the American, before we talk about some of the things nationally with major coaching changes and so forth, I wanted to get your thoughts here the last, I guess, 2-3 weeks, and we've been hearing ad nauseum about the 5 for 5, the Colorado ruling with Judge Charlotte Sweeney. What are your thoughts? East Carolina, if things hold, stands to benefit from it by the return of a couple defensive players, J.D. Lampley and Sam Danka, and then running back Marlon Gunn.
Yeah, listen. If you're a program out there, and I know I'm here in Orlando, UCF brought back one of their linebackers from 22 that's in camp. The court spoke right now. Nothing's happened. You have roster spot. You bring players back if they're available. There's just no doubt about it. If it can enhance your roster, and obviously ECU, it's going to enhance their roster with those three guys, especially defensively, and even Gunn on offense as well. You bring them back, right? And so I think every team in the country is going to do that as long as they have roster spots. And then the 5 for 5, like in general, I love that rule, because what was happening with coaches, and I talked to some head coaches about this, and a Power 4 coach in particular. I won't say that the team or the coach, but he was getting ready last year to play a game on the road. Okay. During warmups, a player came up to him, and this is a specific story, but this happened all around the country. A player came up to him and said, "Coach, I'm not going to play because this is going to be my 5th game, and I want to save my red shirt." So can you imagine being a head coach and you have a player come up to you, and this coach was so pissed off, and rightfully so. He sent him in the locker room. He had him undress, and he had a personnel from the team drive him to the airport and make him fly back home commercial, and said, "You're done. You want to sit out? You're done." And so that's what these coaches are doing. So the 5 for 5 takes that away. There's no more, "Oh, I can play this game. Oh, if we make it to a bowl game, I can play this game." You got 5 years to play 5 seasons. End of story. There's the age limit thing, which I agree on. I mean, you don't want 28-year-olds playing against 18-year-olds. Now, there's exceptions, right? Military. If you go
BYU.
Yeah, BYU. If you go on a religious exemption, something like that. Yeah, that's in there, right? So yeah, I like the 5 for 5. Hopefully, it gets implemented, and of course, the Protect College Sports Act, it's in there. Didn't go. I don't know if it's going to go in September. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. There's a lot of stuff out there where we're all trying to get on the same page. But the problem is, once there's courts involved, local courts, federal in jurisdictions, people are just going to continue to sue. So I don't know the answer, but we're not all on the same page, unfortunately, especially with the money thing. That to me, the biggest thing is, you can't have a team in your own conference, let alone in the country, making, $20-30 million more in terms of NIL or rev share than another team. You just can't do it, because eventually a couple of years goes by, you just can't keep up, and that's like one of the issues. Like a lot of the Big 12 teams, a lot of them are very similar in what their pay structure is, their rev share and their NIL. And then you have Texas Tech way up here. And, it's hard to compete with that. It just is.
Kenny Curling says, can we get college football to go to more of a OTAs kind of all season?
I know I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I definitely think we will. I think the spring ball, especially now, none of the coaches are playing a traditional spring ball. There was a time when we always put spring games on TV, and then coaches said, "Well, I'm not doing that anymore because teams are scouting our players," right? Of course, that's when there was a portal after the spring. There is no more portal after the spring, which to a man, every coach I talked to said that did calm things down a lot in terms of when spring ball ended. The mass of players coming to them saying, "Coaches, I'm transferring this," and a lot of it was they read the tea leaves and they knew they weren't going to play. But you lost you weren't going to start, but you lost a lot of good backups after the spring. So that was really good. That helped. But I do agree. I think, there's going to be an OTA type of system, more NFL-like for sure. Whether it's, it used to be 15 spring practices. I don't know if it'll be 20 or 25 OTA type things. But they're definitely going towards that. There's no doubt about it. And I think the coaches want that.
Yeah, I agree. And, I received something within the last few days, from ECU stating just that, hey, stay tuned because spring ball, the way it's looked for the last however many years with 15 practices, is going to be a thing of the past. Yeah. But kind of nationally now, you had, I think, right around 30 new head coaches. Of course, Lane Kiffin, those headlines stole the show. But then some of those other coaches moving over from the American, like John Sumrall, Alex Golesh, Ryan Silverfield, or in other parts of the country, you had Whittingham going to Michigan, Campbell going to Penn State. What are your thoughts on some of those major coaching changes and the ones you're most intrigued by and are going to have your eye on?
And Matt Campbell, for sure. I mean, that whole situation, it was so late, but they ultimately got the best guy for their job. He brings Rocco back. He brings an experienced core. He brings a lot of players with him from Iowa State. Penn State has a schedule that's manageable, so they're one to watch. Okay, Kyle Whittingham, I had the opportunity to interview him and speak with him at the Cheez-It Bowl here in Orlando for about 20 minutes. Really think he's a good old school coach. I think he fits the way he coaches football and plays football, runs the ball, defense. I think is going to fit Michigan perfectly. I know there's a lot of because he didn't say he hated Ohio State and this and that. There was a lot of that. Listen, the guy's a really good coach, and Michigan needs to clean a bunch of stuff up there. So he's the right hire for that job. So he's intriguing as well to watch that. And then, the coaches in the SEC, I'm a huge Summerall guy. So he's fascinating to see what they do. Again, I don't think he's got any pressure. I don't think, Golish really has pressure on him as well. And really Silverfield, I think, this first year you're kind of playing with house money. Same with Eric Morris. I mean, all four of them I'll be keeping an eye on for sure. But yeah, Penn State's one, I think, because of the way their schedule lays out. Keep an eye out for them.
Yeah, very intrigued to see how it goes for Ryan Silverfield because he obviously did very well at Memphis. I know they fell short of some of their goals, and after having played in the Cotton Bowl in the not too distant past, the standard was very high there. But man, the Arkansas fans on social media, I'm sure it may have been a loud minority, but they were pretty ticked off when they made that hire.
Not the biggest name, obviously, but if I'm an Arkansas fan, you're sitting there, you're like, who are you going to hire? Like, who's out there? Like, who? He's got a proven track record. Oh, by the way, he beat you guys last year, right? Memphis beat Arkansas last year. So, I mean, and that's the thing that all programs deal with. When you let a coach go, sometimes there's not necessarily a better candidate out there. Now, I think Ryan Silverfield's a really good coach, so it's going to be interesting what he does at Arkansas. But you got to be careful, right? That's the thing. They're not always home run hires. Bob Chesney's another one we didn't mention, right? A lot of people were surprised that he took the UCLA job, but he's a coach that was at JMU. He was at Holy Cross before that. For those that don't know, even at JMU, I think he was making like $800,000 a year as a head coach. He basically he's making like $6 million or $7 million a year as a head coach at UCLA. Like, he's taking that job, right? Now, I know for a fact he's a Pennsylvania guy. He wanted the Penn State job. He interviewed for the Penn State job. My sources tell me he interviewed extremely well. He was very close to getting the job. I just, much like, Bubba, what you just said, the Arkansas fans kind of had a problem with Silverfield. I think this is just me talking. I think the powers to be at Penn State kind of felt the same thing with Chesney. Like, he just maybe wasn't the name they needed, right? Although he had taken JMU to a college football playoff. So they're able to get the guy they want in Campbell. But if you're Bob Chesney, you got to take that UCLA job. Listen, even though you got to go out west, you're still in the Big Ten. A lot of your recruiting still in the Midwest and the Northeast on top of it. So you can really take advantage of all those relationships you have. So that's another program to watch, UCLA, because they got nowhere to go but up as well. And Chesney's won everywhere he's been. So that's another one to watch.
Yeah, and many people think kind of from what I recall, maybe a favorable schedule for the Nittany Lions, and they think Matt Campbell could make a big splash in year one.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. So it's going to be one to watch for sure. And again, you bring in an experienced quarterback and Rocco back, right? So, your system's going to be the same. You bring in some other pieces. From all accounts, he's fit in really well. The players they've brought in have meshed with the players that held over. He kept some longtime assistant coaches that were on the staff. He kept them there. I think that's really good for continuity with the program. So, yeah, I think it is a favorable schedule. And, when everyone's kind of talking about Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State, you kind of sit there under the radar a little bit, right? And say, okay, here we go. Let's play it out and see what happens. So, yeah, it's going to be fun.
And then obviously, Matt Campbell, I mean, he'd been he'd been talked about for years and years. Is just, is he going to make that jump? And of course, in a program like Penn State comes along and he decides to try his hand there in the Big Ten. But now I wanted to talk out west. You have a new look Pac-12, basically the kind of the best of the Mountain West, and then the holdovers in Oregon State and Washington State. Your thoughts on this Pac-12 2.0, if you will?
Yeah, and first of all, every team, football team, because the Pac-12 has 8 football playing teams members. Every one is a state. It's either Boise State, Oregon State, Washington. They're all states. San Diego State, so Fresno State. Listen, I think it's good that they're back. The Mountain West kind of revamped as well. The sucky thing, if you will, for the group, and it is now legitimately the group of 6, because for those that don't know that maybe you're listening, the Pac-12 loses their and the official name is, we say P4. It's Autonomous 4. Used to be Autonomous 5. Now it's legit Autonomous 4. They lose their autonomous tag, so they go into the other 6 conferences. So I know the group of 6 got 2 teams in last year. We all know how that happened. It was just kind of crazy. It's not happening again because they changed some things up. So now you're only going to get 1 group of 6, right, out of the 12, but now there's more competition because you've now added a whole nother conference. So it's going to be tight. It's going to be a race all the way through to see who the highest ranked group of 6 program is to get that spot in the CFP playoff. And so there's some good teams in the Pac-12. So, for me, I'll be watching the top of the Pac-12 and the top of the American to see who's doing what nationally.
And then also out west, a team that had a very good 2025, and obviously prior to that, under Coach Barry Odom. But how about UNLV with Dan Mullen?
It's funny you bring up Dan Mullen, right? Because what did we just talk about? Sometimes when you fire a coach, you don't necessarily, the replacement isn't necessarily better. And of course, after Dan Mullen got fired at Florida, that's what everyone was complaining about. Oh, you brought in Billy Napier, he's worse. Well, yeah, when you're calling for a coach to get fired, right? And then, those are the things you deal with. And I think a couple of years in TV did Dan Mullen really well. It kind of rejuvenated him. He had a great year last year. He sits there in the new Mountain West in a good spot. And they play, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but from my memory, and you probably know this, Bubba, I know they play at North Texas, UNLV, and I'm pretty sure they play Memphis early on, too.
Yeah, I think it's week 0.
Yeah, so, that's UNLV and the American, they go head-to-head for a couple of weeks for sure, just with the best team. So that's going to be some fun games to watch going, early on. But, I saw some interviews. He was on Feinbaum a few weeks ago, was Dan Mullen, and boy, it looks like he loves Vegas. So, there's worse places you can live and recruit to. So he's done a nice job there.
Yeah, Northern Illinois, NIU making that move to the Mountain West, and then Sacramento State buying their way. Yeah, swung a deal to go to the MAC, and then North Dakota State making that jump to FBS. Very intrigued. A heck of I think it's week 0 matchup with Jack State.
Yeah, they're if I'm not mistaken, North Dakota State, they were like picked pretty high, right, in the preseason poll for the Mountain West, like top 3 or 4. They were up there.
I believe you're right.
Yeah, and for that matter, Sacramento State in the media poll, they were picked like 6th or 7th in the MAC. I mean, that's something, right? Coming from FCS. Now, North Dakota State, I actually completely understand. Sac State, that's an interesting one, and they play, I know for a fact, they open up week 0 against Eastern Michigan, so they get a conference game right away. So that's going to be a fun one to watch as well. But yeah, you see the movement going on. And someone asked me on X the other day, do I think like, will there be more? Like, will South Dakota State and will Montana State and Montana want to make this jump? And it's fascinating watching. And I've said this before, FCS football is just as expensive for universities for the most part as FBS football. Yes, there's more scholarships, which is really the bigger cost of the money, but the upside with TV money and the advertisement that you get for your program, I think North Dakota State basically said, listen, we've done everything we need to do and everything we can do at the FCS level. It's time to make that jump. And I kind of agree with them. And it would not surprise me in the next couple of years if there's more movement in terms of conference plays. You know, if the Montanas, the Montana States, you know, I did UC Davis a couple times last year. They're actually a rival, or they were a rival of Sacramento State. They're only about 20 minutes apart. UC Davis is another one I think that'll make the jump eventually in when the time's right. So, yeah, it's definitely fascinating times for sure.
One final question I had for you before I go to a couple from our viewers and we wrap up tonight's show. Rich Rod 2.0 in Morgantown. What type of jumps? I think he may have found himself a quarterback, but I love that hire when they went back to him. Sometimes people aren't crazy about bringing a coach back, but in this case, I liked it.
Yeah, and with the system that he runs, everything he does, you needed that year to kind of implement it. Like he's got his roster set the way he wants it. So I think because I did that one of their games early last year at Ohio, where Ohio beat them. So it's tough when you take a program back over and you can't really turn the roster over to the system that you want. To your point, I think he's got that roster where he needs it, and he moves some players off. So yeah, they're going to be a fun one to watch as well in the Big 12 with him back there.
John White chimes in saying, in today's day and age with portal and high school recruiting, how dramatic is a coaching change anymore?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, first of all, high school kids are getting the short end of the stick in the world today in recruiting, because this portal, I mean, if you're a college coach, and they'll tell you, if they can get, you know, a 20-year-old kid that's been in the system for a couple of years, and he's been in the strength and conditioning, and he's a little more mature, and he still has 2 or 3 years of eligibility left, that's where they're going, right? So unless you're a 4 or 5 star, like a lot of good high school players are getting displaced, right? They're going to FCS or they're going to some smaller schools, and that's unfortunate. So that's where I think if we can get some type of system to kind of protect that, for one thing. But yeah, as far as coaching changes, I don't. It's definitely not as traumatic, if you will, as it was in the old days, because every year, basically now with the portal going to be, you know, at the end of the year in January, every team's going to turn over 30, 40, 50 new players in January anyway. So yeah, I don't think it's that crazy when you see these coaching moves. With that said, you still need to have the right coach, as I said before, at your program, because you do have to gel 30, 40, 50 new players every single year. So that's a big job for the head coach to be able to make sure he can get his quote unquote culture, right? We hear that culture. You got to implement your culture, and you got to do it a lot quicker than you used to do it in the old days.
John White also said that his prediction is for UTSA, but a very wide open conference for sure. And can we get Rene's prediction?
Yeah, no. So John's reading my mind, because I picked UTSA. So during the American kickoff, we had to pick who we thought would win the conference. I went with UTSA because of the quarterback play, just because I just think it's like their time and the conference is wide open. So I picked UTSA to win the American, and I picked Braxton Woodson to be the offensive player of the year. I just think with that offense, the way the quarterback runs it and throws it under Drew Cronick, and the ball's in his hand on every snap, I think he's going to get enough carries of the football where I think his numbers are going to be outstanding for Navy. So those were my two picks that the conference made me pick.
And then Kenny Curlings also chimed in. He said, "Love listening to Rene talk football. This man knows his stuff."
Well, I don't know about that. I probably have you fooled. I just love college football. I get excited every year. I'm one of those guys, and I think it bodes well for me with my bosses at ESPN. I never complain. I don't care the assignment. It can be FCS, FBS, Sun Belt, MAC, American, SEC, AC, it doesn't matter. I just love college football. There's nothing better than, I'm biased, but I know the people watching this podcast or listening to this podcast are biased as well. Listen, the NFL is great. We know they're number one, but there's nothing, even college, NFL does not have the passion that college football brings to the table. They just don't. And I think, and honestly, if you want me to get on my soapbox, I think the reason why NFL is so popular is because of fantasy football, right? You can't really have the fantasy football in college because of the movement. But yeah, I'll take the passion, the pride and passion and the energy, and like going to Dowdy Ficklin. I mean, there's places like that all over the country, and I love that I have the honor and privilege to travel and call these games and see these fan bases. So I'm excited. So I'm hoping that Pirate Nation turns out, because it's one of the best stadiums in the country. It really is. I've always said that. I'm not just saying it because I'm on your show. You know how I feel, Bubba. So when that place is sold out or nearly sold out, that's a tough place to play in. So hopefully the fans show out this year. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Very blessed to have a tremendous fan base with Pirate Nation. And like you said, when Dowdy Ficklin's rocking, it is, a lot of folks around the country that haven't been there. I know last year when some BYU fans came, they were very impressed talking to them in a convenience store following the game.
Yeah. And listen, what's the first home game's App State? So listen,
Yep.
App State travels their fans. So they're going to have a good contingent there for sure. So that's one. I think that's an early game. I have a primetime game that night, so I'll probably have my eye on it because that'll be leading into my game. So I'll definitely keep an eye on that game.
Yeah, to Pirate Nation and the Apps fans' dismay, it's a nooner. September 12th noon on ESPN2. But yeah, and then that game should have mid to upper 40s, if not a sellout, and it will be a heck of a environment. Like you said, the Pirates having dropped 3 straight to App State, looking to end that string. But tell folks how they can follow you on social media, and we look forward to having you back mid-season, maybe mid-October.
Yeah, just at Rene Ingoglia, just how it's spelled there. You can't really miss no one else. I don't have to put like Rene Ingoglia, ESPN or anything. No one has a name close to mine. I'm on X and Instagram. Those are the two that I go back and forth with people and put my posts out. So yeah, those are the 2 ways you can follow me.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love. You're down to earth, and you love talking college football with people on social media. Whereas some of the announcers definitely will not do that unless somebody's called them out for something, and then they'll respond. But really appreciate the time as always, and we look forward to having you back, like I said, in mid-October.
You got it, Bubba. Thanks for having me, man, and I'm looking forward to the Pirates this year. Now, hopefully, it's been a couple of years since I've gotten a game in Greenville, so hopefully I get one later on in the season.
Yeah, no doubt. I would love to catch up with you on Town Bank Tower with an East Carolina game. But Pirate Nation, that is Rene Ingoglia of ESPN. Be sure to follow us at Blackbeard Alley on X, at Blackbeard's Alley on all other social media. We'll talk to you soon. And as always, go Pirates.
Painted purple all night long in Eastern North Carolina.